What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Cosmic Wonder, where we talk about Marvel every day, and there has been a ton of reports recently about Jonathan Majors possibly returning to the MCU as Kang the Conqueror. We have a lot of news on that front, but we also now have a confirmation that Coleman Domingo, the actor who is currently voicing Norman Osborn in the animated Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man series coming from Marvel Studios, actually met with the heads of Marvel Studios and had a conversation about possibly replacing Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror. He confirms that these conversations did happen, even though he himself may not have ever really wanted this role. And he explains why he never really wanted the role in a recent interview. But the big thing about the interview is he confirms he did meet with Marvel and they talked about it. They talked about him replacing Jonathan Majors as Kang. Now, to back it on up just a bit, if you are not aware, there was recently a big report about Jonathan Majors himself possibly returning as Kang the Conqueror in the MCU. This report came from the outlet Screen Geek, who stated, according to their sources, Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige is considering bringing Jonathan Majors back into the MCU. The idea is for Majors to appear in a future Marvel project and to wrap up some loose ends with Kang and close the character's story. And I gotta say, I think a lot of people really want that. And I'll say that I was actually pretty bummed that they didn't continue on with the Kang storyline. Even if they had to recast him, I would have still have preferred that and them continue on with what they set up. That obviously is not happening anymore, as the announcement came that Robert Downey Jr. was entering the MCU as Doctor Doom, replacing Kang as the big bad. And of course, the replacement itself was confirmed by Avengers Kang Dynasty being changed officially to Avengers Doomsday, effectively ending Kang as the big bad. So the continuation of Kang's story in the MCU was essentially over at that point in time, but I still would like his story to be wrapped up. And it doesn't have to be big, it just kind of has to be something. They set up Jonathan Majors as He Who Remains and Kang, and then we had the Council of Kangs. We saw millions of variants in the Quantum Mania post-credit scene. All I want is for that to really be wrapped up, and whether that's Jonathan Majors appearing on screen as Kang for 2 minutes while Doctor Doom finishes him off, I'm okay with that, and I hope they do it. And everybody was talking about this story from Screen Geek. Marvel not only bringing back Kang, but them also possibly bringing Jonathan Majors back as Kang. However, a report from TMZ later came out and said they heard this wasn't true, but to be fair, they specifically said multiple sources with direct knowledge tell TMZ Jonathan has not engaged in any talks to return to the MCU after he was booted in 2023 following a guilty verdict in his criminal trial. And I believe that is true. I definitely don't think Jonathan Majors has met with Marvel Studios, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Marvel Studios isn't considering it and talking about it internally. Now, they do state that they haven't heard that the studio was talking about it as well, but here's why I think this might actually be true. One, like I just mentioned, it does make sense to conclude his story, even if it's super quick. But two, he is making a comeback to the acting world, to Hollywood, starring in a new movie, Magazine Dreams. And when this trailer released a couple of weeks ago, everybody was talking about Jonathan Majors, and a vast majority of it was positive. People were speaking positively about Jonathan Majors' return to Hollywood. And the movie from critics has actually been received very well. It got an 82% from Rotten Tomatoes. On Google, it says that 95% of people liked the movie, which goes to show you that despite whatever happened in the past with Jonathan Majors and his trial, people still like him. And he has now made his return, and it seems to be received very well. This could get Marvel Studios thinking. And keep in mind, what he was actually convicted of was recklessly assaulting and injuring his ex-girlfriend Grace Jabari, but not intentionally doing it. Plus, a lot of people have seen the footage that was shown, and a lot of people really don't think that he actually did assault her. Now, the court case is what it is. You obviously can't change that. But another thing that did end up happening was that Grace Jabari also filed a civil suit against Jonathan Majors, but she dropped that, which was a very interesting turn of events. And all of this combined could lead to Disney and Marvel Studios perhaps going, you know what, we do need to wrap up the story. Should we bring him back to wrap up that story? That is what Marvel might be discussing right now. That is reportedly what is happening, according to Screen Geek. And now it's confirmed that Marvel Studios has had conversations with Coleman Domingo about possibly being Kang in the MCU. This was revealed in an interview with Josh Horowitz's Happy, Sad, Confused podcast. In the podcast, Josh basically asked Coleman Domingo what he thought about all of the rumors going around and if any of it were true. And Coleman Domingo says that he heard about it basically like everybody else did, on Twitter and the news. So he called up his team and asked them if any of it were true. And they said no, but he was kind of skeptical, it sounds like. He said he called up his team and asked, "Are you guys having conversations with Marvel that I don't know about?" And they said no. And he says, "Are you guys just being cagey about it?" And I don't think they were. I don't think so. However, he goes on to say, but there were conversations about me going into Marvel in some way. So we did do a sit-down meeting with the heads of Marvel. And we talked openly about the landscape of Marvel and the Kang rumors. But what he said next was, in that meeting, he said he wanted a role to be his. He didn't want to replace somebody. He wanted to build a character that was his own from the ground up, which I totally and completely understand. It's hard to come in and replace somebody. And I think he plays it very coy here in a very good way. He's clearly very media trained because he straight up says, yeah, we talked about the Kang rumors, but from my perspective, it wasn't really ever a possibility because I don't want to come in and replace somebody. And it's funny because he says, I don't know if that was a conversation that was happening, even though he says, I did meet with them and talk to them about the Kang rumors. So clearly the conversation did happen, but he doesn't want to give too much away. Now, keep in mind, this was before Robert Downey Jr. was announced as Dr. Doom. So clearly they didn't go with keeping Kang in the MCU and simply replacing Jonathan Majors. It's something that they definitely could have done and is something that they did talk about. But ultimately they landed on Robert Downey Jr. coming in as Dr. Doom. But that leads us to where we are now. Still, no type of closure whatsoever for Kang. And it would be one thing if we just left it at the end of Quantumania where Kang seemingly died or gets sucked into a deeper part of the quantum realm. They could have just left it at that and say, you know what, Ant-Man defeated Kang, he's gone. But the post-credit scene showed us literally millions of variants and showed us that there were actually 3 main Kang variants dominating and controlling the multiverse, and they have an army behind them. Fans can't just forget that story, and I think Kevin Feige knows this, which is why they might be considering bringing Jonathan Majors back as Kang. And if they don't bring Jonathan Majors back himself, they could recast him just simply to close out his story. And that really wouldn't be that big of a deal. They could recast him with an actor who wouldn't necessarily want to be in the MCU for a very long time. This could be just a simple one and done type of thing. They get to act next to Robert Downey Jr. and say they were in the MCU, but don't have to commit years of their life to being in that universe, because some people can appreciate the MCU and Marvel for what it is, but not want to be in it necessarily. It might not be their acting style. With the case of Coleman Domingo, he actually wants to play a character that he can create from the ground up himself. He confirmed in the interview with Josh Horowitz he does want to be in the MCU in live action. He just doesn't want to replace somebody, which is why him coming in right now as Kang wouldn't work, because he doesn't want to be a one and done. He wants to be in it for a while. So I would say right now Marvel Studios is definitely considering bringing Kang back into the MCU to conclude his story. Whether that's Jonathan Majors or not, who knows? But again, people are excited that he's returning to acting. He's got a lot of positive responses, and I'm sure Marvel Studios is taking a look at that and possibly considering bringing him back. But let me know how you feel about this. Do you want Jonathan Majors to return to the MCU as Kang the Conqueror, even if it's just for a couple of minutes to wrap up his story? Or do you think that they should just leave it? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest MCU news, rumors, or leaks. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.